I'm hanging out here with Jonah today, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about this resource that I created for free. It goes through one letter a day and also one number a day, practices math skills, social studies and science, some phonics things to just really make sure they're getting their letters and letter sounds. I wanted it to be easy for parents to use at home, and I also wanted to be mindful of the access or lack of access, the privilege or lack of privilege, and equity issues that might arise. So I added some modifications so that hopefully once someone actually has the resource, they won't really need much else. If they don't have books or internet, it really shouldn't be an issue. I really tried to be mindful of all of that because every one of us has different backgrounds and different, we're bringing different things to the table. And I'm trying to level the playing field as much as possible. This would also be a really great resource for parents to go over with their students each day, with their kids each day at home, and also a good resource for teachers to send home if they're having to do distance learning. I'm going to upload the PNGs so you could just insert it into maybe like Google Classroom or Google Slides or however you're sending your things out, or even just email them out to the parents to go over with their students. I'm going to walk through what an entire day would look like and then kind of skip through what the rest of the week will look like. Once you get one day down, the rest of the week follows the same cadence, so you'll pretty much know what you're doing. So every single day is going to start the exact same way with an alphabet warm-up. It says point to each letter and say the letter name once, and then your child or student should repeat you, then go through it again and say the letter sound twice. So you would say A and point to it, and they would say A. B, B, C, C, D, D, and just make sure you're pointing to it and make sure that they're actually looking and paying attention. Then you're going to go back through and say the sounds. So you would say A, and then they would say A, B, 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 K, 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 D, 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 D. And that's just going to continue on and on and on. One tip that I would give you is to make sure you're just saying the sound and not adding any extra sounds. For example, sometimes when people are teaching the letter sound that D makes, they'll say duh. When it's not duh, because you wouldn't sound out dog and say duh, og, duh-og. It's just d, og. So like don't say don't say g, just f and g. And then my main thing that I want to stress is the letter R. So many videos, and I've heard so many educators when they're teaching the sound that R makes, they say but R does not say R just says r. Because then I've noticed when students are taught those sounds the wrong way, when they go to sound out a word that has an R sound, if they're trying to sound out rat and they're saying at, then they can't figure the word out. But if they have the right sound and they're saying at, rat, they can get it quicker or better. So just be mindful of the way that you're pronouncing the letter sounds. So each day you'll have a letter of the day, and it's going to go through the entire alphabet. So the way that you would teach this slide is say, this is the letter A. When you think about the letter A, think about Annie. She is an ant. The sound A makes is ah. The sound A makes is ah. And then you ask them to think if they can think of any words that start with that sound. It might be really hard for young learners to come up with some sounds, and that's okay. Asking them to think about it, whether or not they can produce it or not, starts getting their mind thinking about sounds in the right way, and later on they'll be able to produce sounds. Then it'll be time to practice writing, and I said to do one or more of these activities because I recognize that some people may not have access to pencil and paper or dry erase boards, or you might have access to them for a little while and then run out, and that's perfectly okay. You can practice finger writing this letter in the air 5 times or writing it on the floor. Write this on a piece of paper if you have it. Just get creative with it as long as you can monitor what your child or student is doing and say, okay, go all the way up, come down, cross the middle. For lowercase a, let's go around and down and kind of monitor their actions. And then again, talk about the sounds that this letter can produce and other words that start with this letter. Then we come here to brainstorming. You can write it down or you can say it. Again, if you have access to dry erase boards, paper, and pencils, great. If you don't, that's great too. Come up with as many words that you can think of that start with the ah sound. Here are 2. astronaut, and axe. If you have access to paper and pencil, start writing it down. Even if they're words that your child cannot read yet, it's important for them to see that the sounds that they are saying have letters and words, have letters attached to them, and all those letters work together to make a word. So remind them to think about food, animals, places, names, and things. Like I said earlier, it might be really hard the first time around to come up with these things, but you can help them brainstorm. And you can say, well, what about apple or banana? Can you think of which one starts with the sound? You can kind of give them some clues to help them get started. Then there's one more activity called Think About It, just to make sure they're getting one last look at the letter and thinking about the sounds and having fun with it. You have them make up a story about Annie, the ant, and use the list of words that you just created on the last slide that you brainstormed to add the letter of the day to your story. So it could be a story about Annie the ant getting apples with an astronaut and having to use an axe to chop down the tree. Whatever you can have them make up, even if it's super silly, to make them be thinking about the letter A, what it looks like, and what it sounds like. And then you ask them, do you remember how to write this letter? And see what they know. If they don't remember, you can go back to the write it down slide, practice tracing it again or writing it down on the floor, the wall, or paper, whatever you've got. This brings us to sight word practice. Sight words are words that your student or child has to know just from looking at it. They're not going to be able to sound it out. Like, look at the word the. You're not going to be able to sound out the word the or of even. Some of them you can, but most of them you cannot. They just have to look at it and know it really quickly. So you're just going to ask them to try to remember what these words look like. You can say it, point to each one and say the. Repeat after me. What's this word? The, of, and. Point to them out of order. If you're able to make flashcards, make flashcards. If you're able to have a list on the wall that you can keep adding to each week, because these are going to be the same all week, Monday through Friday, and then the next week you'll add another 3, and the next week you'll add another 3, and then hopefully 3 at a time. They can just keep adding to their word bank of sight words. Each day there will also be comprehension skills practice, because while your child is learning letters and letter sounds and sight words and learning how to read, even though they don't know how to read yet, they're going to be able to know how to comprehend things once they can read. They can learn both at the same time. So I suggested that you read a short story at home if you have it, or online if you have the access, like YouTube or some other app. Make up a story or watch a show. So you could just put on a really quick short show and then have your student answer these questions. Who were the characters? And characters are the people, animals, or things that were in the story or show. Encourage your child to talk in complete sentences. What was the setting? Where were they? Outside, at the park, at camp? And then what was your favorite part? And answer in a complete sentence. My favorite part was blank. It was my favorite part because blank. Just get them talking about whatever it is they listened to or read or watch. It's going to start to build their comprehension skills over time. So this component will be different each day because sometimes it'll be science, sometimes it'll be a life skill, sometimes it will be social studies. So for today, it's sink or float. And I encourage kids to fill a bowl, the bathtub, the sink, or a pot with water, and with an adult's permission, grab 10 items from your home to test if they will sink or float. Before you drop them in, make a prediction about what will sink and what will float. And they'll be able to say, I predict, and that's a vocabulary word, predict, blank will sink or float. And then you can talk about, why do you think they were sinking? Why do you think they were floating? How many did you get right? And just get them to start thinking about objects in that way. Each day will also have a number work math component to it that looks something like this. I plan on going through the numbers 0 through 20. So you're going to teach your child how to say it, how to trace it, how to count it, find objects that match that number, and then the talk about it section will be different skills like shapes, patterns, counting, adding. They'll just be different as the days go by. And then last but not least, each day will end with a learning reflection where you ask your child or student, how was your day? And these questions will be different depending on the day of the week. Was it fun? What was a challenge? How can you do better tomorrow? It's important to get them to think about what they learned about, and then you can get a good grip on what they liked, what they didn't like, how you can better support them the next day. And then each day will always have the reminder question, what was the letter of the day and what sound does it make? Now, if you've got the first day down, the rest of the days will just basically follow the same rhyme and rhythm. So again, you'll go over the letters, your student or child will repeat after you, and then you will say all the sounds. I'll go ahead and go through all of the sounds for this one. A, b, k, k, d, d, e, f, f, g, g, h, I, j, j, k, k, o, n, a, p, p, qu, qu, r, s, t, a, v, w, x, y, z. Notice that I didn't say t, v, w, like wa. It's just w for the letter W. Just try to get the sound only. You'll continue on to the letter of the day. This is the letter B. When you think about the letter B, think about Ben. He is a B. The sound B makes is b. The sound B makes is b. Can you think of any words that start with this sound? For Write About It, remember you only have to do at least one of the activities. If you are able to access YouTube, they have great videos for showing students how to properly write their letters, but you can also just practice finger writing this on the table or on your leg or anything just to give them that muscle memory practice of how to make this letter. Continuing on with the same pattern from the day before, they're going to come up with as many words as they can think of that start with the b sound, and then they will also make up a story trying to use as many B words as possible. The sight words are going to be the same, just quiz them, see what they remember. You can build them with Play-Doh or blocks or anything you have around your house. Try to get creative with it, as creative as you can, or whatever you have available to you. Now for the comprehension skills, remember you can read a short story at home or online. You can make up a story or even have them watch a TV show. The questions are different for today. It's what was the problem? That's something bad that happened to the characters. What was the solution? How did the problem get fixed? And what was the worst part and why? Make sure you always ask them why so they can explain themselves. And again, encourage your students or children to speak in complete sentences. For this day, I'm asking students to think about the world and just letting them know that the official languages of Kenya are English and Swahili, and letting them know that Kenya is a country located in Africa, and having them think about why do people around the world speak different languages. And I also showed them the Kenyan flag. If you're able to, look up a book about Kenya or a video about Kenya, go for it. Maybe just any background knowledge you might have. Just talk about how it's a country and explore with your child why it's unique and special and exciting that different people from around the world speak different languages. Number work today is saying the number 1, tracing the number 1, counting 1 finger on your hand, finding 1 object, and then doing a talk about it, which is just counting and how many. If your child cannot count yet, help them count, have them repeat after you, point to the objects as you count each one, and let them know that the last number you say when you're counting is how many there are total. The more you practice with them, the better they'll be. And then last but not least, it's time for reflections. You're going to ask your child, what was interesting for you today? What did you do better than yesterday? And what learning are you proud of? And then again, just as a reminder so they can keep that letter and letter sound in their mind, asking what was the letter of the day and what sound does it make? And that's how you'll close out day 2. I'm going to try to run through the rest really quickly. So again, you are going to start with your alphabet warm-up, saying the letter name, and then saying the letter sound twice while your child repeats you. Then you're going to move into the letter of the day and just read what's on the screen. After that, practice writing it any way that you can. Brainstorm different words that start with that letter sound, and then make up a story about words that have that letter sound. You'll move into sight word review of the, of, and then on to the comprehension skills, and you'll just go over retelling the story. What happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end of the story. Support your child as much as they need it, recalling details from their book or their show. They will then move on to a making an observation science connection, and today's lesson is going to be about pushing and pulling, just talking about how it's a force and just having fun pushing and pulling things around the house. The number work for this day centers around the number 2, and then they're discussing shapes in the talk about it. As always, they will end the day with a learning reflection time. Hopefully this is starting to get a little bit redundant and you're just telling yourself, oh yeah, I've got this, I can do this. Alphabet warm-up, comprehension work, sight words,
science, social studies, number work, I can do this. You've got this. You can do it. Just give it a try and you'll find your rhythm. You'll also find the time when is best for you and your child to take breaks or have recess, try to get some lunch, whatever it is that works best for your family. So here is what day 4 looks like. You're on to the letter of the day, which is D, doing the same old activities for it. Again, if you have books or access to YouTube or songs or apps, do anything you can to enhance it. Find a game that focuses on the letter D, find an alphabet song, and point out that the letter of the day is D. Do whatever you can. In the book you read, make sure you point out D. When you're having dinner, if something on your plate starts with D, make sure you point it out. Just trying to get them as involved as much as possible for the rest of the time. And then this is going to move on to a reflection on the screen, you can see, and then it's going to start the last day, which is going to be alphabet warm-up, of course, and then moving on to the letter of the day, which is going to be the letter E, where they'll learn about Elena, the elephant. I'm hoping that putting a name with the animal will help them remember the sound even more. So make sure you really stress the sound and talk about the animals and their names as you go over it with your student. Again, writing wherever possible if you can, and if not, just do the best you can with what you have. Today's lesson is about exercising. That should be fun. Number work centers around the number 4, and then, of course, you'll end on a learning reflection. I hope this was really helpful to you, and I hope that you can see yourself doing this and you feel a little bit more confident going into working with your child that really needs to build some letter, sound skills and reading skills and things like that.
Thanks so much for watching. I really hope these ideas were helpful. Hopefully you can see yourself implementing them at home and make it work for you and your student.